Well, I'll tell you what, over the weekend, the legendary property developer Lang Walker passed away aged 78. Walker's contribution to urban development, to housing, to industrial development, to retail, it just simply can't be underestimated. Lang Walker and his Walker Corporation saved and redeveloped, for example, the Woolloomooloo pier in Sydney. They were going to demolish it. He then turned it into upscale apartments, hotels and restaurants, but that's just one. It's a small one in hindsight. In Sydney, he developed the King Street pier. Anybody who's eaten down that area knows how big that is. He reinvigorated the Broadway shopping centre in the heart of Sydney. He built the whole Rhodes Peninsula effectively and is now building 4 giant buildings in Parramatta, effectively creating a second Sydney CBD. Now, you might think Lang Walker only worked in Sydney. Of course not. He was all over the world. In Melbourne, he was the force behind the Collins Square development. And in Adelaide, the Festival Tower is going to become Adelaide's tallest all-electric building on the Sunshine Coast right now to coincide with the Olympic Games. Massive developments there. And this list barely scratches the surface of Lang Walker's accomplishments. Hope Island, all these places. Kokomo he did, which he started, of course, when he joined his father's earth-moving business, but then moved into development when some cash-strapped developers effectively handed over land in lieu of paying their debts. Well, Tom Forrest is the chief executive of the Urban Taskforce that twice made him the Property Person of the Year. And he joins me now. Tom, many thanks for your time. I mean, I'm trying to give some sense of the scale of what Lang Walker and his Walker Corporation have left behind.
Well, the scale, Ross, is immense and it crosses all areas, as you've outlined. For an individual developer to be successful in every single area of property development, from low-rise residential to medium density to high-rise residential to massive commercial towers, he has not only created wonderful buildings for people to live and people to work, but he's also changed communities, changed the way that Sydney thinks about itself. You talked about the Rhodes Peninsula. You talked about the redevelopment of the whole CBD of Parramatta. You talked about the great work that he did at Broadway. This is a great man who was an inspiration to many in the property sector over 50 years.
Tell me about the character of the man. I mean, I'd spent quite a lot of time with him, I must admit, and he was always great company, rambunctious, I think you would say. He was an entrepreneur, sure, and wasn't afraid of anybody, is my impression of it, at least anyway.
That's exactly right, and your impression is well placed because I know that you knew him well, Ross, but I have had a close relationship with him on the Urban Taskforce executive over the last 4 years while I've been the chief executive. He's a man who never left you not knowing what he thought. When he had a view, he made sure that you knew and fully understood what that view was. And I think that upfront attitude, which was always a no rubbish attitude, was the way that he treated all politicians from all sides of politics, all decision makers, all stakeholders. You knew exactly what he wanted and why he wanted it. He was prepared to be flexible, but he had to be convinced. Once he came on board, he'd go with the new environmental agenda, the remediation of contamination. He would go with improved quality if that's what the market was demanding. He was a man who was great at selling a vision and a true leader of our industry.
It's interesting because even his ability, his timing was astonishing. When he sold out to Mirvac prior to the global financial crisis and effectively was then able to rebuy back his business ultimately, or most of it, and re-establish it. These are the stuff that the true entrepreneurs are made of here in Australia.
Says a lot about Lang Walker that he sold his business, but he didn't like the idea that ASIC and the stock market needed to be informed whenever there was a negative event, that he thought this is just what I deal with. If you invest in a Walker Corporation-owned company, then you're investing in my capacity to solve those problems. ASIC didn't like that, so he thought, well, I'll buy my company back and then I'll solve the problems. You know what? He bought the company back, he solved all those problems and he made a fortune out of it.
And that really is the great Australian dream, isn't it? I mean, I've only got 30 seconds. Tell me what he would have said about any potential changes to negative gearing right now.
Well, I don't think he would have been supportive. I think that was tried back in the 1980s by Paul Keating. He did it for a small amount of time. I think it was 2 years. It caused a capital strike. It caused rents to go up. Not enough housing supply. Don't think it's a good idea.
Tom Forrest, good to have you on the program. Great legacy in Lang Walker as well. Many thanks for your time.
Thank you, Ross.